In the future, America has been devastated by a severe drought and now people are willing to kill for water. Most people left, but the home family stayed because Father Ernest believed that the trees would grow again if they got water. He remembered when the earth was green, but his son Jerome did not. One day, two thieves tried to break into a small building on Ernest's farm by burning the lock. Ernest caught them and opened fire, causing one of the thieves to try to shoot back. He was immediately killed, and the second thief begged for mercy as he explained that someone had told him there was water there. He also claimed he needed to urinate and grabbed his pants, but Ernest saw the gun and shot him first. Jerome sees all this from afar and says he can help, but Ernest just tells him to call him Dad instead of his name. Then Ernest locks the small building, revealing a pump. Unfortunately, he wouldn't give them water, so they would have to force their mule to continue without water. The duo continues and meets the watermen, a group of people who monopolize the distribution of water extracted from deep wells thanks to a government agreement. Ernest gives them supplies and the men pay him with water. He also reminds Jerome not to make these men angry because they are dangerous, they should just trade and leave go quickly. Ernest often tried to convince them to provide water for his farm, but the boatmen charged too much. On the way back, their mule fell and was seriously injured. When the animal suffered, Ernest shot it to end its suffering. Jerome cries but swears he can do it. When they finally arrive at the farm, Jerome's sister, Mary, serves them MREs. Then she washes the dirt dishes while Ernest listens to the radio and Jerome draws animals, which is their only hobby. Suddenly, Ernest heard a noise and ran outside to find Mary had snuck out the window to meet her secret boyfriend. The next day, Jerome and Ernest go to Sam's auction house and bid on a robot named Simulate Shadow or Sim to replace their mule. Sam's son Flem also bids and fights with them to the end. But Ernest won the auction and his debt became worse. Then they went to the hospital to visit the children's mother, Catherine, who was unable to walk because of an accident. The hospital had a special machine that connected her to a wire to help her walk, and the only way the family could bring Catherine home was to buy this expensive machine. After a fun afternoon with Catherine, the duo returned home. On the way, they meet Robbie and Suze and their baby. Ernest calls them vultures for using their child as a pity card for help and walks away ignoring them. They went to the gas station and after filling up, Ernest drank a little to calculate the price. He then brought water for Robbie and his family. The couple considered selling the baby because they couldn't afford to raise it, but Ernest advised them against this and promised to help them get water. Later at the farm, Flem appears at the farm, revealing himself to be Mary's secret boyfriend. He asks to borrow Sim and promises to pay the rent, but Ernest refuses unless Sam signs a guarantee. Flem takes offense and tells Ernest that he will never water the land before leaving. The next time Jerome and Ernest met the boatmen, they were having a good time thanks to Sim, and Ernest set about persuading the men to consider the offer of installing a water pipe in the site. His camp. Ernest then started digging up his old pump so the boatmen could check out what they had. While at work, he tells Jerome that he needs to go out and meet a girl or at least make friends, but Jerome would rather take care of his family. On the way back, they saw Flem speeding away. At the farm, Mary washes clothes by putting cleaning products in the vacuum cleaner. Ernest arrives and forbids her to go out, which angers Mary, who says she is old enough to do what she wants. While Ernest swears that he only wants to protect her, Mary says that he hates her father and loves Flem, so she tries to run away. She runs into Jerome and asks him for money, giving Ernest time to catch up and arrest her. Mary cried and claimed that Ernest had failed her family. Then he locked her up and nailed her window. Sometime later, Ernest and Jerome wake up and discover Sim has been stolen. Ernest assumes it is Flem and goes to his house, but he learns from Sam that Flem left by truck for the mountains that morning. It is revealed that Ernest's farm belongs to Sam and Flem is haunted by what his family has lost, although Sam believes that the land is barren and the water will do him no good. That afterwards, Ernest went up the mountain to investigate and he was suddenly knocked down. In the evening, Ernest wakes up at the boatman's camp, where he is accused of having stolen their belongings thanks to Sim. Ernest claims he didn't do it, but Sheriff Caleb attacks him. A fight ensued and after much struggle, Ernest was able to steal Caleb's knife and a gun, which he fired into the air to detain everyone. He ran away while Caleb continues to yell threats at him. On the way home, Ernest finds Flem sleeping by the fire and Sim nearby. He steals the machine and supplies to make Ernest look bad. Dutifully waited until morning to wake him up with a gun pointed at his face. Then he tied Flem to Sim. As they walked in the hot sun to find the boatman, Flem continued to taunt Ernest by talking about Mary, so Ernest pulled the rope, causing him to fall as punishment. Finally, they were both too thirsty to last long, and Flem convinced Ernest to stop for a drink. The utensils contained alcohol rather than water, and Ernest soon became intoxicated by his addiction. Flem only pretended to drink while claiming that Caleb wanted his head, so he only stole the machine to survive. He even offered money to Ernest, but he refused because of the suspicious story. Ernest then tried to stand up, but the alcohol made him dizzy and almost unable to move. This was Flem's plan, and he took the opportunity to hit Ernest with a rock, causing his head to hit the cliff. As bleeding and unconscious, Ernest flashes back to Catherine's car accident, which was caused by her drinking habits. Then, when Ernest woke up, he was tied to Sim, and Flem started pouring more wine into his mouth and screaming like crazy. Flem then goes to the farm, and Mary jumps on his bike so they can escape together. Worried about Ernest, Jerome decided to look for him. When night fell, he found Sim at the boatman's camp, where the men told him that his father had died in an accident with the engine. When it was time for the funeral, Mary returned, and the two brothers cried together. They also had to visit their mother to tell them the bad news. Flem picked them up in his truck and took them home. At the farm, Jerome angrily starts hitting Sim with a hammer, so Flem goes to stop him. He explained that mourning was difficult, but he couldn't let it ruin his source of income, and offered to become the new head of the household so he could help his siblings. He also shocks Jerome by announcing that Mary is pregnant. Flem has big plans for the farm, and Jerome agrees to let him give it a try. In the afternoon, Flem supplies the boatman and asks Caleb to install water pipes on the farm. At first, Caleb refuses, but suddenly Flem blames him for Ernest's death because Caleb's gun and knife were found with the body. Fearful of the possible consequences, Caleb agreed to divert the water to his siblings' land. A few days later, the new farm pump was officially installed, and Flem worked hard all day to plant and grow wheat, which is watered with sprinklers. Now families can also enjoy real showers. A few weeks later, Jerome was surprised to see a small leaf on the ground, and finally the ground was covered with wonderful plants. To celebrate, Flem and Mary got married and tattooed each other's initials on their arms. During the party, Flem drinks and continues to think about Ernest's death. A few days pass, and Sam shows up at the farm with two men from the bank. Turns out Ernest's debt is huge, and they want Flem to pay. Flem scares the horses with his bike just to look tough, and Sam scolds him, explaining that no one has ever wanted to buy the land and that Ernest has it because he simply never moved go. Thanks to the water and crops, the bank will be able to sell it, so Flem has to pay if he doesn't want to lose it. That night, Flem put Sim in his truck and picked up Robbie and his baby. He claims they will ask the price just to get an idea, only for Flem to sell the baby against Robbie's wishes. Panicked, Robbie asked his child and the buyers to open fire, killing Robbie. They also tried to shoot Flem. He shot back as he ran away, leaving the machine behind. Sim is caught in the exchange, and the damage causes him to activate a mode that returns him to his original factory. The next day, Flem pays the bank with the baby's money, but he tells the siblings that he sold Sim to Robbie. Meanwhile, Sim arrives in town and is built by Calvin, who finds the owner's information and calls the farm. Jerome answers the call and becomes suspicious, so he runs to the local market. He discovered Flem talking to Suze, who was holding a doll in his arms and pretending it was his. Noticing this, Jerome tries to talk to them, but Flem quickly takes Suze away. Later, at the farm, Jerome asks Flem about Robbie, but Flem says that Robbie took Sim and abandoned his family. Determined to find out the truth, Jerome announced that he was going to visit his mother, but in fact he took the bus to the border. But the guards did not let him pass because he was an unaccompanied minor. At that moment, he was approached by Anna, who offered to take him over if he paid. Jerome accepted, and Anna put him in a truck full of chickens. Just a few hours later, the truck arrived in town and Jerome saw her for the first time. He reunites Anna and she took him to the factory, but she only took half of the money as payment. She explains that the return trip is a scam. He doesn't need a guide to leave because no one will stop him from leaving. Before leaving, Jerome asks her what had she ever met a boy named Ernest, but Anna didn't recognize the name. Jerome then meets Calvin, who shows him all the functions of the machine. It turns out Sim's eyes were cameras designed to record slopes for reforestation purposes and recorded everything Sim saw. Calvin teaches Jerome how to use it and gives him some privacy. Jerome becomes emotional when he sees his father again, but this turns to horror when he learns that Flem killed Ernest. It turns out that Flem tied Ernest to the machine and took him towards the boatman's camp, making it appear that Sim lost control and dragged Ernest to his accidental death. Jerome has an incident in the middle of the office. In the evening, it started to rain on the farm for the first time in more than a decade. Jerome quickly turned around and appeared calm, asking Flem how to get Sim back. Flem is confused and checks the warehouse, shocked to see Sim standing there unharmed. He said Robbie definitely brought him back from his guilt. A few days later, Jerome actually visited Catherine and promised to take care of her like Ernest did. One afternoon, Flem and Jerome hunted animals to drive them away from the crops. Flem misses all his shots and passes the rifle to Jerome, blaming the weapon for his failure. Jerome desperately wants to shoot Flem, but he kills a deer instead, proving that the problem lies with Flem's aim. When they returned home, Jerome hid the rifle in his room. During lunch, Jerome said he received a call from Robbie, who was looking for Flem. This upsets Flem and he breaks down saying that Jerome is lying. Mary scolds him for his attitude and Jerome insists that he is telling the truth, so Flem runs out of the room. The next day, Flem receives a letter written by Jerome pretending to be Robbie. The message asks Flem to meet Robbie on the cliff because he is in trouble. Before leaving, Flem looked for the rifle and Jerome said he took it to the shop to get it fixed because Flem said it didn't work well. Flem had to play along to avoid getting caught and apologize for his outburst at the table. After getting a knife, Flem and Sim went to the cliff and called Robbie. Suddenly, he fell into a secret hole and broke his leg. Flem screamed in pain and begged Sim to help him, but the machine didn't understand. At that moment, Jerome appeared and just looked at Flem with the stone in his hand, making Flem understand that the boy knew the truth. Flem desperately begs for mercy, but Jerome ignores him and continues to stare at him, making him suffer under the scorching sun. Finally, Flem started screaming for help again and begged Jerome to think of his sister and the baby. He goes on a long speech about accidents and regrets, making Jerome so angry that he shoots Flem, killing him. When Jerome returned home, he left Mary thinking that Flem had abandoned her and did not tell her how Ernest really died. Thanks to the money from the crops, they can now buy real food and the brothers agree that they can finally buy the machine so that Catherine can come and live with them. Jerome erases all the footage from Sim, ready to start over. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.